Hello everyone, welcome back to Angela's Craft Room. Today I've got this lovely children's card for you made with the Stampin' Up stamp set Hedgehugs. Now this is the stamp set here and it was in the Occasions catalogue which ended in May, but I'm sure a lot of you would still have it. So I thought I wanted to make a few children's themed cards because I just seem to be lacking in having them on hand. So I've used the Woodlands embossing folder and I've used a punch and a few little things. So we'll get started and I'll show you how I put this card together. Okay, so just grab my grid paper. Now I'm going to start off with a piece of Very Vanilla, and this is the piece that I'm going to sponge using a dauber and my ink pad. Now this piece measures 5 1/4 inches by 3 7/8 of an inch, and I'm just going to grab my soft suede ink pad and I'm just going to go up and down, particularly on the embossed pieces first. And don't worry about going on the parts of the cardstock that haven't been embossed, because we're going to go over that as well, but I want the embossed areas to be a lot more prominent. So I've just put this through the Big Shot, this piece of Very Vanilla with the Woodlands stamp set. I'm just going to go over that because it started to go into the parts that weren't. And it's just about, just keep adding colour. Now while there's just a little bit there, I'm just going to use a circular motion on the part that isn't embossed. In this case on the Very Vanilla. And I most probably could have punched out the circle for the sentiment before, because that has saved me so I'll just move over to the centerpiece. So it really does accentuate the embossing, this technique. And another thing that I do sometimes is, once I've finished with the colouring, then I stamp a Versamark ink pad over the whole piece of cardstock. I'm not doing that today, but just over the whole piece of cardstock, and then sprinkle it with clear embossing powder. Make sure it's clear, not white, and then shake that off and heat set to dry, and it just leaves such a wonderful glossy image. And another embossing folder to use is anything with flowers on, and then if you use this technique on the flowers, I know the embossing folder is retired, but it's called Lovely Lace if you can get your hands on it, or if you have it, and it's really a great one to do it. I have used that method of doing this first over the whole thing and then stamping it with the Versamark ink pad and then putting the clear embossing powder on it. And before you're just remember, before you use the Versamark ink pad, if I was doing it over this, once I've finished this, then I would use my I'd use my embossing buddy first before I stamp it with the Versamark ink pad. But it's a great technique to try. I might even do a tutorial on it. I did sell my Lovely Lace embossing folder and I regretted it, and then I found that it was in the clearance rack in Stampin Up online store, so I grabbed it again because I just really love it. And this would be good on the brick wall embossing folder too, because you know it would really highlight the brick wall behind your images. Now, I just want it to be a lot darker on those. So it's a lot, it hasn't taken that long for me to do. I'm nearly to the end to do this technique for you. But one thing is it's best if your ink pad is juicy, not drenching with ink, but not dry. The first card I did, my ink pad was quite dry and it needed re-inking, and it did take me quite a while to get it done. But I've noticed today with this ink pad it's a lot juicier and it's just hardly taking me any time at all, because I did contemplate doing half of it before the video, but I think sometimes it's important that you see how I do it. Mistakes and all. I'm quite happy for you to see when I stuff up. We're all only human after all. So I think that will do. So just set that aside for a minute. Just give it a couple of minutes to dry. And you could keep going. You could keep going with that, like if you wanted to put more. If you wanted to put more ink on it, that's entirely up to you. But it does, I would just really love this technique. It really showcases the front of your card. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, we need 2 little hedgehogs. So what we're going to do, and I had the flower cut off, but that's all right, we can glue that down separately. So I'm going to be using some Stampin' Up blends. So I'm using the crumb cake. So for the first one, just be careful when you go really close to the lines. And these are such small images, you really don't need much pressure. What I like to do, I like to do a little bit of a flick motion if they're only small images, and I hardly apply any pressure at all, especially when I'm close to the lines. And because this is already stamped in soft suede, this is already coloured for us, so it makes life easy. And you could just leave it like that in the one colour, or you can get the darker colour out and you can do a little bit of blending if you want. So you can see it's pretty quick using the stamping blends. Just be careful when you go close to the edge. And if you didn't want a fussy cut out, I just wouldn't do the first technique I showed you with the embossing folder and how I added the colour. I wouldn't go so dark because you couldn't stamp on that. You'd have to put a lighter colour on top of cardstock and then stamp your little images. So I just need to add a little bit of colour to this. That's all it needs. Now I've got a little bit of dark, so what I might do is just go around the top of his head. And I'm definitely not an artist, so you know, I know a lot of people talk about light and shade, but I just do it, and all we want to do now is blend out that line. But with what I was saying about light and shade, I know a lot of people say, you know, you're supposed to do it where the sun is going to hit the image, and I've never been one to worry too much about that. I just do it if I'm happy with the image. That's good enough for me. So don't put yourself, what I'm trying to say is don't put yourself up to someone else's standard of crafting, because we all are at different levels, and as long as it makes you happy doing it, that's all that matters. I'm just going over the feet a couple of times because it's so it's such a little area. I just want to darken up the feet, but I don't really want to. So he looks quite cute. So I'll just do the feet on here again. So I'm I'm just trying to be very careful and not go outside the lines. And then I'm just going to do the top of his head there. Straighten his little porcupines out. So I'm just doing little circular motions to get rid of that line. I still want it to stay dark. I still want to keep that blended bit at the top, but so our next step is we're going to punch a hole in that embossed piece that we've coloured, and then we're going to stamp our sentiment so you can see the sentiment through from the front of the card. So I'm pretty happy with them. So always put your caps back on your blends markers straight away, because we don't want, oh, better not lose that flower, because we don't want them to dry out. So that's dry now. So I've just got a 1 3/4 punch. So I'm just going to line up, I like to line up the side of my card with my punch there, and then I know I'm pretty straight, and I'm just going to punch that out. And I always keep all these little bits and pieces because you never know when you want to use them on a card. Just put them in a cellophane packet. So cut out our circle. Let's pop these over. Now I'm just going to stamp. What I need to do first is our base card, of course, is 11 inches long by 4 1/8 wide and scored at 5.5. Then I have a piece of Bermuda Bay, and you'll see why I'm putting this down first. This is 5 inches by 3 5/8, and I'm going to, this is actually smaller than the piece that we embossed. So the ideal is I just want to have a piece about center, like that. And then I just followed through with the Bermuda Bay and stamped the little hedgehog inside. And then what's going to happen is we're going to glue this piece on top, and then we're going to stamp our sentiment in there. So you've just got to think what colour you want to be showing through when you're looking at your card from the front and they can see the sentiment. Because this is embossed, it's best to put a little bit of extra glue on. Do a bit around the circle because we really want that circle to glue down, but we don't want a lot of glue. We don't want it seeping through the circle when we're gluing it down, if that makes sense. So then I'm not going to press hard. I just want to, I'm not even thinking where that Bermuda Bay piece is. All I'm looking at is putting this piece of embossed piece down as straight as I can. So this is a lot darker. So I'm just tapping around so the glue adheres that circle down. And what I was saying, this is a lot darker than my first initial one. And I think this would have looked really good if I'd stamped it with the Versamark ink and then done the clear embossing technique. It would have really looked nice, but we don't. I'm not going to do that today. Okay, so then we're going to grab a Misty tool. Well, I am. You can just use your acrylic blocks, but I just like to use the Misty tool. I'm a bit of a fanatic with it. So I'm just going to, because this is like the whole card I'm trying to hold down now. So I'm just going to pop my and this is just one of those stamps that is a strange shape. So I'm going to just fold this piece of scrap so I can just lightly stamp it to start with. Just want to make sure it's straight, which is pretty good. So stamp that up, because the worst thing would be to have a crooked stamp after you've finished doing all that work to your card. So like that. Just wipe off my stamp with my crafting chamois. So I'm going to close that ink pad up. So that was pretty easy. So that's got the image showing. So now what we need to do is think where we want to put these guys, which I think I want them there, and then I want to see where I want to put, with the Woodlands stamp, the Woodlands embossing folder, I try and put them on the little birds on the branches. You don't have to, it just depends where the branches are. Might even just do that. Okay, so we just need to glue them in place, and I'm just going to use the Tombow glue. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to use the Stampin' Dimensions. That's what I'm going to do for the birds. So I'm just going to pop him up there. Press him down. And he can go there. And every time you do this, it'll be different because the branches will turn out to be somewhere else. I think that's a bit much putting him there. And I might just put him in a different position. So I pop him up. There's a little branch there. So he can just sort of go off to the side. Now with this one, I am going to glue this one down, and then I'm going to pop the other one up on dimensionals. So as I said, I'm trying to do a few children's cards. I seem to have plenty of female and male birthday cards, thank you cards, wedding, sympathy. But I just need to get some children's cards done, so I thought I might as well do them for a tutorial for you as well while I'm doing it. So I just need a little bit of glue on this flower. When it was cutting, I was cutting it out, it tore off, unfortunately. But that's okay, we can improvise. So it's just a bit fiddly. And I'm sorry my hand's in the way, but I've got to actually see where it got snipped off. And it's right on an embossed area, which is making it even more difficult. But that's okay. Then I'm going to put some dimensionals on the back of the second one. Just about 4. Let's take those backs off, and I should have pushed down on that with my tweezers because they come off a lot quicker that way. And then I'm just going to put, I'm guessing this is a girl, and so I'm just making sure they're level along there. So I'll just put my glue away, and we'll just add some rhinestones to the little birds. So I've showed you a few techniques today, so I hope that you'll give this a try. And even if you haven't got this stamp set, just use whatever stamp set you've got. You know, I always say that you don't have to have the exact stamp set that I'm using. You might like to use a different stamp set and try the embossing technique with a different embossing folder, or you know, just use a different or different images. So there we go, that's our card for today. So you can see how this one's a lot lighter. My ink was very dry in this one, and this one's very dark. So it just depends which, I like both of them, but it just depends which, whether you like light or dark, or you can use any colour. This one today we used was soft suede, and this was crumb cake. So they're completely different colours, light and dark. So I hope you liked that video, and until next time, happy crafting!